A group of men in suits think that families earning more than $75,000, entire family, household income, $75,000, shouldn't be eligible for the coronavirus relief package or the relief checks. And this, again, I just want to reiterate, this is analysis that was done by these guys who think if the household income is more than $75,000, then direct coronavirus relief checks might not be best for them. So this is an effort to essentially do the means testing to ensure that certain people don't qualify for relief. And in this particular case, with this particular research that I am 100% against, they are alleging that even fewer people should qualify for these relief checks. Let me tell you what the research says. John Friedman, an economics professor at Brown University and co-director of Opportunity Insights, the firm that actually did this research, Harvard economics professor Raj Chetty and economist Michael Stepner analyzed credit and debit card spending data and found a clear uptick in spending for families and individuals who earn less than about $50,000 after the stimulus payments started to widely hit bank accounts on January 4th. In contrast, spending barely moved at all for families and individuals earning over $78,000. So the argument that they're trying to make here is that, well, these checks should be targeted toward a certain group of people who desperately need it. Now, as we also know, the coronavirus relief checks have been means tested, meaning if you filed your taxes and there was any indication that you made more than $75,000, then the amount of money you get in the relief check starts to taper off. And then by the time you get to over $99,000 a year, you don't even qualify for it. So it's already means tested. But this study decreases the number of people who would qualify if it's actually believed and used as evidence by lawmakers. They follow the advice here. Even fewer people would qualify for the relief check, which is infuriating. The price tag to send another round of checks to couples earning more than $75,000 and singles earning more than $50,000 would be $200 billion. Yet the researchers estimate this group is only likely to spend $15 billion of that money, about 7%. So it's all about, are they gonna stimulate the economy? Are they gonna stimulate the economy? Are they gonna stimulate the economy? What about people who just need to be able to pay their rent or their bills? It's not all about stimulating the economy. It's about people being able to afford just regular bills that maybe they're not able to afford anymore because they got laid off, furloughed, whatever, as a result of this pandemic, as a result of the shutdowns tied to the pandemic. And if you want to means test people, why don't you do it after the fact when people file taxes? People need money in their hands right now. So these kinds of studies get taken seriously and it's incredibly frustrating. Congressman Ro Khanna responded to this by saying, where were these studies when the Fed lent companies money to pay dividends or executives? Did we look at the impact on consumer spending? But suddenly economists are opposed to middle-class families paying off credit card, mortgage, and student loans. And that's what this really is. There's this fear that the money is gonna be used to pay off debt or pay bills as opposed to helping to stimulate the economy. Buy. That's all it's about for these people doing these types of studies, and it's infuriating. John, go ahead.
Yeah, they're worried that people are gonna do like an individual level version of stock buyback, and that can't be allowed this time. But anyway, yeah, there are a couple of issues with this. One is that every time we've been through a cycle of, in theory, checks being sent out, the argument against doing this is that it is complex and slows down the process of actually sending them out. And I would argue that since it's been like more than 20 days since those $600 checks were sent out, maybe speed is something that we should emphasize here. I think that that's probably not a bad idea. And also, as you pointed out, the way that they figure what your income is for the purposes of means testing is based on a previous amount of taxes that you paid, what your income was in the previous cycle. But the entire issue, exactly. that's necessitating the aid is that the economy has fallen apart. And it's not necessarily the case that everyone has lost their job, of course, but many have. And many others are doing much worse than they were, even if they're lucky enough to have kept their job. I'm not an expert like whoever it is that did that study, but I kind of feel like I want to sit down with them and maybe shake them a little bit and say, do you understand that we're talking about bad times? We're in the bad times now. You seem to be pretending we're still into the pre-times, but we're not. That's the whole thing. I don't, and it really just does come down to the people who are making these decisions, for the most part, aside from a few who seem to understand things, are entirely disconnected from the reality of what families are dealing with. They don't understand it. They haven't been working class, if at all, for decades. They haven't really struggled for decades. And it's been so long since significant aid was sent out.
No, you're absolutely right. And again, if there's this fear that people who are still employed, white collar workers who are making six figures and they don't need this aid would end up getting this relief money. Okay, fine, I understand the concern. You wanna make sure that the right people get the relief that they need. But why don't you wait until they file their taxes? And if it shows that they had a considerable amount of income and they didn't necessarily need that government aid, then you tax them and get that money back. But that's not what they're doing. I mean, they're playing these games that's incredibly frustrating because it not only delays money in people's hands when they desperately need it, but it shows you that there's like all this deep thinking and analysis when it comes to providing aid for the needy, for individuals, for workers, versus all these companies that got the money they needed right away. Influx, infusion of cash, infusion of liquidity for banks and corporations. No questions asked, trillions of dollars, no questions asked. Stop nickel and diming the American people. Want to know who loves to nickel and dime the American people? Someone who should have lost her re-election bid, Senator Susan Collins. Embarrassment, not just to the Republican Party, but to this country. She said that it's premature to be considering a plan on the scale Biden had requested. Remember, Biden has proposed a $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief bill that allocates money for vaccine production and distribution. It does have a provision in there for direct checks to Americans, $1,400. Of course, I would like it to be $2,000, but it also includes unemployment benefits to the tune of $400 per week up until September, I believe. But anyway, the argument coming from Senator Collins is, well, we just passed a $900 billion coronavirus relief package that gave you 600 whole dollars. I mean, isn't it premature? Do you guys really need more than that? What's wrong with you? Absolute trash. And Ro Khanna is on a tear because he responded to that by saying Susan Collins doesn't get to decide what national policy is. Joe Biden does. But also Democrats who have, yes, slim majorities in the Senate and the House also get to decide. Think the way that Mitch McConnell does. Think like a Republican and get it done.
I mean, Joe Manchin's been doing that for a very long time, and he could be very important in what aid ends up getting sent. Yeah, the thing is,
obviously, that's not what I mean.
I know, exactly. I liked Congressman Khanna's tweet. But as much as like there's been a lot of things to give Joe Biden credit for over his first week of being president, the fact that they came out with the $1,400 rather than the $2,000, and I don't want to get back in a big debate about that. I think it's pretty clear cut. But regardless, and then just a couple days ago said, well, and we can negotiate on the $1,400. What are you talking about? Like again, he apparently, according to Congressman Khanna, gets to set national policy, and he seems to be. He's already negotiated with himself twice before the actual debate even starts. And that's not a good sign. Like the president saying 1,400 is negotiable. Well, gee, I wonder if they're gonna try to negotiate that down a little bit. I wonder if someone will pick up on that. And I think that yes, they probably will. And it's been 20 days since the last one. People have been suffering a whole nother, almost an entire extra rent check and utilities checks. And you had to eat a lot of food in the meantime. Money back then would have been much nicer than much less money later on. That's sort of how finance works.
I mean, I don't know what people are complaining about, John. They got $600. I mean, theoretically, if you didn't file your taxes through direct deposit, then you haven't gotten that $600 yet, but don't worry, you'll get it eventually, maybe. It's so incredibly sad. And I agree with you on Biden's messaging. Why is he bending to these people right now? Why are Democrats so afraid to do what's popular?
Unity.
No, but this is, no one is interested in seeing Congress unite. Like, look, in an ideal world, they would be, if we had rational people in Congress that were actually looking out for the best interests of the American people and their constituents, then yes, unity among members of Congress, fantastic, great. But what we want is people to see one another as people again, right? Like we want unity in the country overall. It's really hard to do when people are and have been told for 4 years straight that the scapegoat, the reason for all of your problems, the reason why you're experiencing all this economic anxiety is because of immigrants, it's because of people of color, it's because of Black Lives Matter, it's because that's the kind of messaging that was, by the way, fueled by economic anxiety that has torn the country apart, right? So that's the kind of unity that maybe Joe Biden should focus on. But like the heart of that is ensuring that people are economically stable. I don't care if Susan Collins and Ro Khanna are cool with one another and want to have a beer after work. I don't care about that at all. I don't want that kind of unity. I want the fight to be strong among Democratic lawmakers. I want them to fight for their constituents as hard as they fight for their corporate donors. That's what I want to see.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.